Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So it's a well-known fact that Gran Turismo's AI absolutely loves to cheat. I'm pretty sure showing you guys an image of this bright yellow Ford GT40 may have just brought back some very sour memories. And well, it's no different when it comes to Gran Turismo 7, and today I'm going to look at the most notorious example of GT7's cheating AI. The first and probably the most notorious time we ever saw this car was during a 2-lap Nordschleife race in the European Clubman Cup 600, which of course also saw the introduction of the Alfa Romeo GTM. Upon beginning the event, the car itself starts around about P6 and well, very quickly will start making its way through the grid. Not only does it start very close to the front, within seconds it's already on the tails of other cars and already beginning to absolutely fly through the track. So after a few overtakes, the alarm bells might be ringing. I mean, if you look at the front of the grid of this AI, a lot of these cars are what you would typically see in the high ranges of 500 to, of course, 600 pp, which is a recommendation for this event, and since it doesn't change depending on the difficulty and all these cars are here no matter what, you'd assume that's what they're all hitting. However, very quickly the Alfa Romeo is off in front of the pack. Now, something that has stayed with Gran Turismo series for a very long time is the fact that if a car is far too quick, typically the AI just cannot handle it and will tend to just go piling off into barriers or spinning out, and it's exactly what you'll see with the Alfa. Although it does manage to very quickly recover, it is almost always very sketchy through the corners. Once it hits that main straight though, this is where the car absolutely comes alive, hitting a ridiculous top speed of 212 miles per hour. Whilst the 600 pp recommendation may just be that a recommendation for the player, that will mean that all of the AI cars are running in that 600 pp range. As you can see, even in a car that we've got built to 630 pp, we're only hitting 183. In terms of the rest of the AI, this is where the cheating really becomes apparent. The Mercedes will hit around about 180, the Porsche in the low 170s. In terms of the other AI, it's a range of 160 to 170 miles per hour, usually in these sort of low to high ranges. Really nothing more than 180 mile an hour by the rest of them. That is a 40 mile per hour straight line difference. It's at this point you realise, well, the game's not even trying to hide it. Even when you do manage to get past the car when it might go a little bit sideways and sketchy, it will very quickly absolutely rocket past you. Now, I actually became pretty fascinated with this car and the way it works, so I used to track it down and see where else we may see it appear, and there's two other events that we can actually see this car in. After first being included at the end of 2022, it took till 2024 for the car to come back with the Suzuka 3-lap event. So I decided to head over to Suzuka to just check out if the AI was still cheating during this event, and I'm pleased to report that absolutely it still is. However, it's a little bit different this time around. Instead of starting towards the front end of the grid, it will actually start towards the back. But of course, you guessed it, very quickly this car will start making moves. This is of course most apparent when it gets to the big long straight sections of Suzuka and just how quickly it clears the rest of the AI. Once this thing gets shifting, it is absolutely gone. As you can see, the poor Alfa Romeo 4C just did not stand a chance. In the end though, funnily enough, it does seem that PD's way of nerfing this car by putting it so far back does actually work, as the car just doesn't seem to be able to win the race, but it will come very close to. The latest time we've seen this car is over at Blue Moon Speedway, where it may have got a bit of a nerf over at Suzuka starting so far back. The issue with Blue Moon, it's a very fast and flowing track and suits this car to the ground, and well, the car basically is back. In a flash, this car will start jumping at the rest of the AI to get those moves done, and whilst it can get a little sketchy through these slower sections considering its sheer amount of horsepower this thing must be putting out, it will quite quickly start making the moves and making its way to the top of the grid. It doesn't matter how far back Polyphony started it, this car wants the win. By the time it comes to the latter stages of the event, the car has managed to weave its way through plenty of the traffic, and even things such as the Aston Martin and this Lamborghini Urus, which are, let's be honest, no slouch whatsoever and very powerful in a straight line, are absolutely made to look stupid and like they're standing still by this thing as it rockets towards 200 miles per hour. If the player isn't in the lead by this final few stages of the race, you can guarantee this car will actually manage to take its way all the way from around about P15 to P1 no problem. Again, just no match are the AI for this absolute menace. So it's down to us, the players, to get this car stopped. In terms of the car itself, it doesn't always show up though. So after the car's introduction in 2022 and seeing it pop up once again with the 2 new events in 2024, I became actually really fascinated in just how out of the boundary of 600 pp really is this car, and just how powerful is it. So with that being said, let's try and build this car and hit the same exact top speeds as, well, this thing actually does. So first things first, when it comes to recreating this car, we need to check out what parts it's actually running and if there's anything specific to this car. Also on top of that, we need to see how it runs during a race, just to suss out the kind of car this is. From what I'm seeing, with it being very powerful, the AI does struggle to drive it. So it does mean that it has a fair bit of horsepower and probably a real lack of downforce for the actual output this car's put in. The next thing we also need to do is check out roughly what top speeds it's hitting and where the wind direction is coming, etc. So on the Nordschleifer event, we can see here that there's a 4.1 wind and it should be pushing the car back, meaning it shouldn't be able to hit those incredibly high top speeds as easy, but it does still top out at around about 212 mph. So from the footage, the answer to this seems to be low downforce, high horsepower. Next up, let's have a look at the specific parts. As you can see, looking through the wheels and taking a look at the brakes, these are the standard brake discs and pads that come with the Alfa Romeo GTM, so we don't need to worry too much about that. In terms of the kit this does have on, it does actually have some aero changes. We also have things such as the toe loops and stuff like that that are just purely cosmetic, so they won't change the car. We can see that it does have fairly wide sticky tyres, and in terms of the gameplay, it is running on sports hard, so the default compound. It also has a custom wing set and a racing exhaust, so those for sure we do know have been changed. So confirmation there of some aero changes as well as performance parts as well. Sports hard compounds probably explains why it's fairly sketchy around the corners, and the turbocharger does seem to perform like a high RPM turbocharger. So we've observed the car, so now it's time to go ahead and build it. We're going to head over to Brand Central and to Alfa Romeo in Europe, and of course we're going to actually go ahead and pick a brand new one of these up. As we may note, the PP rating is 580.88, so already very close to that 600 recommendation. Power is 532 brake horsepower, drivetrain is FR, weight is a fairly hefty 1580 kilograms, and it is already turbocharged. So we're going to go ahead and pick one of these up. Next up, we're going to see if we can source a livery for this vehicle. The best way to go ahead and do this is of course heading over to the showcase and searching up Gallo. Now, as you can see with the car selected, there is some AI replicas for this vehicle. For me, the best one was right here by Clockroo, who has this fairly accurate recreation of this car. So with the livery installed and all the wheels and aero parts on that we actually need, it came out to 594.11 pp. Already very close to 600. So aero and wheels are done, and it was time to next install the parts we know this car's running. I went for a height adjustable sport suspension to keep the PP as close to 600 as possible as it is lowered, and of course put the racing silencer on and didn't touch the aero as it doesn't seem to be altered. 602.97 pp and 560 brake horsepower is what we were leaving for our first run, as we aim to hit 212 miles per hour in the Nordschleifer. As you can note, the wind is pretty much the exact condition that we saw when it was running during that single player event. So on our first run, it did seem that the aero was pretty much set where it should be for the car itself during the single player event, but I did notice that the car isn't bobbling up and down as quickly as it does during that event either, so maybe it does actually feature a bit of weight reduction. Overall, for our first run, we only managed to hit 188 miles per hour, just not good enough. So back to the drawing board. Next up was the addition of a high RPM turbocharger. This did manage to take our performance point rating and horsepower rating up to 627 brake, 613.05 pp. So it was time to head out on track to see if this made any difference. Once again, the car felt exactly like it should during the single player event. Very sketchy, a little bit tail happy and fairly overpowered. So the thing I'm keeping an eye on here is to see how the weight starts bumping around the track, and it does seem that with the extra speed it is starting to bobble around a bit more. Maybe it didn't actually have weight reduction after all. Again, this is already a weight reduced factory version. Next up then, we're going to see where the top speed goes this time. We have extra wind pushing us back, but it shouldn't make too much of a difference. As you can see, we still only managed to top out at 199 miles per hour. So after a few more upgrades and a few more runs, it wasn't until we fitted the titanium connecting rods and pistons and hit 722 bhp and 633.23 pp that we actually managed to break the 200 miles per hour barrier. I also removed some downforce as well to see if that would help the car, but well, it still just didn't happen. We only just managed to breach the 200 miles per hour barrier. Nowhere close yet. 12 runs later and we did finally get towards where we needed to be with the upgrades. I settled on stroke up as well as removing some of that little bit of extra weight just to see if we could get the car running like I wanted it to. Eventually we fitted the racing crankshaft and finally we ended up with 753 brake horsepower, 1264 kilograms. I also did try during my runs a upgrade to the transmissions. Unfortunately it was topping out with an extra gear, or 8th gear should I say, and it wasn't actually still hitting the 212. Under this assumption it must be the default transmission that this car is running on. So off we went on our final run. The car acting exactly like it should. Pretty sketchy through the corners on its default aero, bobbling up and down just like it seems to do during that single player event, and upwards of 200 miles per hour already. At this point we're heading towards the bridge and aiming for 212, and we already hit that, hitting a top speed of 213 miles per hour. We'd finally done it. So what did it take to build this car in the end? After studying it in single player, getting the aero on, getting the wheels sorted, and of course 20 plus runs with different upgrades, this is what I finally ended up with. 656.28 pp, 753 brake horsepower. In terms of stability, g-force and acceleration, you can all see those on the left. Sports hard compound height adjustable sports suspension unchanged since the start, just to give it that lowered look. Downforce 105 and 325, the default settings for that. Fully customizable ECU, high RPM turbocharger, anti-lag system, racing intercooler, racing air cleaner, racing silencer, racing manifold. Brakes are left standard, of course we can see those. Semi-racing clutch and flywheel, stroke up, titanium connecting rods and pistons, racing crank, and 2 stages of weight reduction. So there we go, the Alfa Romeo pretty much has to be cheating. There is a bunch of other cars during Gran Turismo 7 single player events that do seem to be outside those set parameters for events. If there's any ones that you do want me to specifically look at, please let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to deep dive into them. In fact, making this video was actually refreshingly fun. Massive thank you to everyone who's watched this video. If you're new, feel free to subscribe. If you're returning, well, welcome back. Anyway, have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care guys. Peace.